real quick intro, family practitioner by trade. I've been doing it 35 years. I haven't done primary care family practice for at least, has it been a year? Yeah. Because we've hired some folks that are really good at that so that I could move on to other things. I started getting, I don't know, bored is really, it's a strong word, but I was kind of done with family practice a few years ago. And so 15 years into my career, I started learning about preventive medicine. I realized that family practice was about scheduling mammography and making sure you all got referred to places and really being a sending you out to other places. And I said, man, this is not why I spent 25 years in school. My scope of practice was getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And I'm old enough to remember the days where I first started my career where there were no hospitalists. We did everything in the ICU. We did the surgeries. We did things now that you talk to these young primary care practitioners and they did, you did what? Yeah, and we did OB and we did vasectomy. We did everything. We did herniorrhaphies, tonsillectomies. It was in the days before the super specialization was not a thing. So that's kind of a little bit about me. Took a bunch of classes and everything I could get my hands on in nutrition, mind-body medicine, starting in about 2006. Got invited to speak for the Institute for Functional Medicine, got on their faculty. Around that time, started teaching preventive cardiology at Loma Linda University for the Med Center. Been doing that for about 10 years as well, with an academic career. So I needed to find somewhere that would allow me the real estate to do all these weird things. And Sam and Amber Warren, who own FMI, have been gracious to host me. So a little bit about today. Today is really the first public discussion in this area that I'm aware of a true precision medicine age reversal program. I'm not aware of any in the Treasure Valley. What we have are components in the Treasure Valley. We have NAD/IV, we have peptides, we have lots of hormone experts in the area. We have people that are doing exosomes and stem cells and injections and microneedling and PRP and a lot of regenerative services. I spent the first half of the summer in Vegas doing regenerative training and learning how to do PRP and more from an orthopedic as opposed to a cosmetic perspective. So I'd understand kind of the full breadth of this discussion of age reversal. How many of you follow Peter Attia? Okay. How many of you have heard of David Sinclair? So a lot of the same hands. David Sinclair is a PhD, Harvard professor. Peter Attia is another MD like myself. There's a lot of folks that have written books. They're on podcasts. Mark Hyman, Kara Fitzgerald. Kara and Mark teach on the faculty with Institute for Functional Medicine as well. And they've all got books on longevity. Mark's is Young Forever. Kara's is, I think, called Longevity. David's latest book is called Lifespan, which is awesome. David Sinclair, PhD, he's been doing this since the 90s, looking into aging and aging as a disease, not just a word. So this is a new paradigm, really, setting the stage for today's discussion. Aging, what is aging? Aging has been this elusive word that we use that we all kind of think, well, this is an inevitable process, which it is, but for the very first time, we're seeing it as the greatest risk factor for the top 10 causes of death in the world, and especially in the United States. So I'm talking about things like atherosclerotic heart disease and stroke, cancers. So that's the number 1 and 2 on the list of 10. Pretty big deal. Alzheimer's disease, diabetes, problems with prediabetes and cholesterol, high blood pressure, all of these things, arthritis, osteoporosis, bone loss. That seems like a little bit of an orphan to make that list. It seems unrelated. But when you understand what's causing bone loss, you go, oh, okay, it's related to insulin resistance and inflammation. And by the way, all of those things are driven by inflammation. So we kind of call ourselves inflammologists. Recently, science has had some incredible advances with the ability to measure and figure out what are the elements that seem to be key factors in us all aging. It appears that it's not just genetics, that we're all just destined based on the DNA, the book of life story we inherited from our parents. But that in addition to genetics, it's the stuff we eat, our experiences, what we call the epigenetic, over the genetics that affect us. An example, if I eat too many old-fashioned donuts, the epigenetic effects on my DNA from mom and dad, I'm going to start writing inflammatory genes that I maybe wouldn't have done had I not chosen those kinds of dietary things. If I have a really awful job that I resent, and every Monday morning that high cortisol from my stress from being in those toxic relationships happens all the time, over time that cortisol environment changes what genes in each of my cells get expressed. Those are examples of epigenetics, and some of them are inheritable. We've got all kinds of data now proving that. How is it inheritable? Well, epigenetics occur when we put little tags, things like acetyl or methyl groups on our DNA, our double helix that's inside of the nucleus of our cells that we inherit from our parents. So when I make bad choices with diet, with exercise, with the people I hang around, I get tags, chemical tags put on my DNA that say to my cell, make this protein, not that one. So now I've got this genetic potential, and I've got this environmental reality, which is creating what I am, what we call a phenotype. Brown eyes, gray hair, that's what you see. Diabetes, what you get. It's the end result of what's going on at a cell molecular level. And what's really advanced recently with the study of aging science is cell and molecular biology. For the very first time, we understand aging at a molecular level. That means molecules like sirtuins, which are gene families that are ancient survival pathways that when they're upregulated, we have all this really great stuff that happens, like we slow our aging process. Sinclair started finding this with many others in the lab with yeast, little single cell organisms. They might live to be 35 divisions, 25 on average long. So you can get an idea with something that has a very short lifespan, you can make little tweaks and see it manifested very quickly. Next, they went to nematodes, what are roundworms, and then Drosophila, fruit flies, and then the Holy Grail, mammals, poor mice and rats. So all this data started single cell all the way up to now a complex multi-cell mammal, and now we're seeing some things in human culture and in human trials showing that these same pathways at a molecular cellular level that are happening in these lower animals is conserved. It's the same process throughout the different species all the way up to us. Now there's a whole lot of stuff to be vetted, validated, reproduced, but the initial findings are incredibly exciting for the future. Sinclair and others now say that it's going to be probably within some of these current generations in this room, a commonplace thing to see people living to being 110, 115 years of age. First time I heard that, I thought, yeah, blah, 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 whatever. More importantly, the quality. These are going to be people that say, I don't want to live to be 115, 100, let alone 115. Why? Because our paradigm is we see people that age, their quality of life sucks. It's awful. They're not engaged, they're not involved. And this is hopefully not going to be what happens as we push this longevity age, lifespan, because the health span is what's getting you there, and the health span is your biologic age. So the idea is you're going to see people in their 80s, 90s, even 100 years of age that are working full time, that are acting more like 50-year-olds, 60-year-olds. And the genetic information is still there, even though we don't live to be Methuselah's age. It's still there. There's been a loss of access to this information. And that's a really complex, you got to listen to Sinclair's book, talks about all this. And he gets into the weeds on the biochemistry and the genetics of it. My point here today is to get you excited about the prospect of having for the first time measurable tests, not just genetics where you go and have your genes done. We learned from the Human Genome Project, that was really disappointing because there are families of genes that control other families of genes, and the level of complexity was overwhelming. Thanks to machine learning, thanks to artificial intelligence, in some areas anyway, there's been incredibly ability with computing power to really drill down and figure some of these things out. So now we know that this family of genes called sirtuins, which you're going to hear a lot about if you read anything about anti-aging medicine, are upregulated by a bunch of stuff that we can do. Now, it's not just a bunch of supplements either, which that's important to me because supplements are supplements. They're a bridge. I don't think that they should be the focus. Most of these things are from plants, things that we call stacks, sirtuin activating compounds. The most recent of which, and probably the most powerful to date, you might have heard of, it's called NAD. Now, NADH is a vitamin B derivative that is in every human cell. It's been around forever, and it's got all these activities, one of which is upregulating sirtuin and allowing the sirtuins to fix DNA breaks and damage, which occurs as we age. The problem is sirtuins, they never come back home when there's too much damage going on. As we age, we get exposed to things like ultraviolet radiation and toxins, inflammatory diet, stress, sedentary lifestyle, obesity, all these things that are driving not just inflammation, but DNA damage at the cell molecular level, inside the cell. So it takes this sirtuin character, which is a gene, it's a family of genes, there's 7 of them we know about, and it distracts it from its normal activities, and it's running around plugging up damaged breaks in the DNA from all this epigenetic stress and exposure that we're all exposed to. There's no way to avoid it. We can mitigate, minimize it, but we're all going to have some of it. So the idea is not to be perfect in a bubble somewhere so that you live to be 150 years of age and whatever. That's not the purpose. The purpose is to avoid chronic disease. This aging thing is at the tissue, cell, and molecular level. And tissues are what make up organs. And when organs fail, we check out. Which organs are we talking about? Brain and Alzheimer's, so neurons. Cardiovascular, endothelial lining of our cells, plaque. Arthritis in joint cells, kidney cells, and most important, our immune cells. The age of our immune cells dictates how we age, we think, in the rest of the body, because it drives inflammation or not. There's that word again. So the answer to the question at the end is inflammation. Were there to be a quiz, which there's not going to be. So what this program we're going to be offering is done is it's looked at Mark Hyman's book, it's looked at David Sinclair's work, it's looked at Kara's work. I've looked at a lot of this stuff online, Tony Robbins' Life Force program, and we've taken the things that we like, that have the best evidence, that are the least expensive, with the most actionable items that you can take, and we've made our own program. Par 1, precision age reversal. I'm not a golfer, but it stuck. I don't know. I don't even golf. That's the sad part of that. But what is precision medicine? Let's talk about that first. Precision medicine is taking the old paradigm of you walking in with a group of symptoms and me throwing a few labs at you and then playing whack-a-mole with pills to see if you stay away from me and don't come back for a while. It's a reactionary approach. Precision medicine is looking at your genetics, your detailed labs, not just a CBC, chem panel, and a lipid panel. I'm talking about things that measure these molecular markers of you aging and having inflammation where you shouldn't. Excesses. Inflammation, you need it. It's how we heal our wounds when we get cuts. It's when it gets stuck and it's chronic that it causes chronic disease. Alzheimer's, heart disease, diabetes, arthritis, bone loss, you name it. The top 10 of the things. So it's relevant. So it becomes a really relevant discussion. It's not just about, oh, they're talking about living longer. It's really a distraction. It gets people's ear. Oh, living long. I want to live better. And that's what this is about. And I would take it that next step and say, I want to live better by not suffering with drugs and pharmaceuticals and surgeries that are unnecessary for those top 10 chronic illnesses, most of which are avoidable and now totally preventable. To date, we haven't had an objective way to measure aging as a disease unto itself. Aging is the number one risk factor for most all of the top 10 causes of disease worldwide. If there's a solution to bankrupting us all from spending 86% of the 4.3 trillion that the United States spends every year on medical care, 86% of that is on chronic complex disease. 86% of it, guys, at 4.3 T with a trillion with a T. These are big numbers. So we spend $12,500 per each of us in this room every year in this country, and we're ranked dead last in quality of care. Most of that has to do to poor access and neonatal mortality, unbelievably. We have one of the poorest infant mortality rates in the world, in this country. And maternal care, fetal care is horrible. A lot of it's access. My argument is, great, let's give people access, but what happens to you when you get behind the door with the doctor? What kind of care is being given? Is it reactionary or is it personalized and precise? Is it based on your unique fingerprint of labs? Is it based on your epigenetics? Is it based on those markers? And now what we have are these cellular senescent lab panels that can measure NAD inside the cell for the first time. It can measure glycated misfolded proteins for the first time, not just hemoglobin A1C. It can measure beta-galactosidase. It can measure sirtuin activity. These are all things we didn't have access to until just very, very recently. And it's due in large part to the advances in genetics, epigenetics, cell molecular biology, and the technologies of being able to measure these things, isolate them and measure them, and then have it be in an affordable package where it's not for people that are, running Amazon and things like that only. So, a little bit about the specifics of PAR 1. PAR 1 has a silver, kind of an entry engagement, gold, and platinum. What I've done is I've designed it to where you can get at different price points, different technologies, different values. Some of the things that are available in this that I'm particularly excited about is a health test from True Diagnostics. True Diagnostics is something where you can go as a consumer and buy your own kit. The problem is knowing how to take the information from these individual online self-administered kits and incorporate it into a consolidated action plan. And I'm hoping that that's where I'm worth something for you guys, having studied this a lot and looked at it from a big picture. My background is expertise in men's and women's hormones optimization and peptides more recently. And then I would say cardiometabolic, preventive cardiovascular disease. So cholesterol, blood pressure, diabetes reversal, metabolic weight loss. Those are my two areas historically. Why I'm doing anti-aging is because those are on that's the 2-3 things on that chronic age disease list that I'm telling you I've spent the last 20, 30, 32 years of my life studying. And now to have something that is a universal pain point where you can find, you go after this, and downstream all these diseases kind of disappear, or you prevent them, or you reverse them. That's exciting to me. That's exciting. And that's what gets me up in the morning and, willing to take risks at 61 years of age in a cash-based practice doing something I've never done before. My wife, yeah. Oh, yeah. So it's, I went into medicine to be preventive and proactive, and I've been a square peg in a round hole in family practice reactionary care. So I call myself a recovering MD. I get a lot of information from reading and podcasts after residency. In fact, most of my medical knowledge came after my medical training. The medical training got me a pulpit, credibility. I learned how to do medicine after my residency and after my medical training, which might sound really crazy to all of you. And the reason we're doing it as cash, because I want to work for my patients. I don't want to work for insurances anymore, who, newsflash, are who practice medicine in this country now. It's not the doctors. It's the insurance companies that tell the doctors what they can and can't do. It's basically expert guidelines which take out critical thinking, and you follow a cookbook. It's one size fits all, as if we were all the same. Precision medicine flies in the face of that and says, wow, that's really not true. In fact, the science says it's not all about money. It's probably about just figuring out what for this person is their rocks in the river that need to be cleared. And as soon as we get out of that thinking that it's a one size fits all, then we have to go back to thinking critically and actually asking those hard questions. So when we don't have the ability to have tension or questions or outliers in the scientific community, we should all be very, very afraid because we won't have any progress. And that scares me more than anything. So that's why I'm here. I like the precision idea because I like personalized care. We need insurance companies. We need acute care for broken bones, for heart attacks. Don't rub Hawthorne on me if I drop to the floor grabbing my chest, or try to put resveratrol in an IV. I don't want it. I want morphine and nitro and probably a statin in that case. But yeah, so we are not replacing that model. We're coming up alongside and saying, hey guys, you're spending 86% of the $4 trillion on chronic disease and you're ranked dead last. Maybe we should do this side differently than what you're doing on an acute care model. You got this going on great, and we do it better than anyone else in the world. But if we apply acute care as a model of how to do chronic care, this is where we are. And we can't afford to write checks anymore like that. And, even as wealthy as a nation as we are. So we're going to be looking at things like the True Health or True Diagnostics biologic age, which gives you a DNA methylation of how old you are. Actually, it's going to include, however, not just your genetic DNA methyl tags, epigenetics. It's going to include the proteins and the metabolites of those proteins in action, so we know what genes are working in you and which ones have been flipped off, so that we know which ones to turn back on using epigenetic factors like sirtuins. We're going to be looking at one of the cell senescent labs that has come out of Florida that is looking at some of these tests you've never had done before, where we can actually measure cell senescence burden. I've never been able to access that kind of technology. It will tell me your cytokine levels that are associated with premature aging. It's going to tell me your glycated proteins beyond just hemoglobin A1C. Hemoglobin A1C has been used in diabetics and pre-diabetics for years, but it's not the most sensitive test. And there's glycation of many, many different proteins in the body besides hemoglobin associated with advancing and premature age, diabetes, heart disease, and what we call type 3 dementia, diabetes. High sugar, high insulin in the brain accelerates dementia big time, as it does accelerating bone loss. So anyone with pre-diabetes is at big time risk for bone loss. That's why diabetic patients, especially my postmenopausal women, have such dramatic increased risk of osteoporosis. Nobody's talking about that outside of our clinic, really. It's all about calcium supplementation and weight-bearing exercise, and oh yeah, don't smoke or drink too much. But one of the biggest drivers of bone loss is inflammation and prediabetes, high levels of insulin. And in the brain, bad stuff happens with too much of that around. So we're going to look at food sensitivities. We're going to look at gut health. We're going to look at stool samples, digestion. We're going to look at not just your plaque burden, but for the first time ever, we have access to an imaging center that does soft plaque. Soft plaque in your arteries is the stuff that's unstable, that's vulnerable to rupture. Up to now, we've only been able to do coronary artery calcium scores, which is a CT scan that looks at calcified plaque. The calcified plaque, however, is the stuff that's old and it's stable and usually not going to bother you. For the very first time, we're able to partner with an imaging center out of Bellevue, and they've got several locations now, clearly imaging, that allows us to get total plaque, calcified and soft plaque. And so my patients that go to St. Al's to the Vascular Institute, who get stress tests, that get coronary artery calcium scores, who've had problems or who are at high risk, go and get this additional CT angio, non-invasive test that finds vulnerable plaque that no one saw. It's emotional. The first time that I did the scan, a guy that I see, he's probably 12% body fat. He's a gym rat. You would have looked at him and said, why are you even at the doctor's office? We totally discriminate against these kind of people because they look so healthy. But he had one of these genetic predispositions to early heart disease. He had all this workup done, I won't tell you where, locally, and we sent him and got this scan done, and I got a call back, cardiologist from Bellevue, Washington. Is this Dr. Holthouse? Yes. I'm driving to Oregon with my wife, right? First scan I'd ever ordered. Well, patient X, Y, and Z has a 70% blockage in his left anterior descending artery, the big boy that goes down the front of the heart, the left ventricle. This after being cleared at a local cardiologist institute because they didn't have the right imaging technology to look deeper. So this technology is one of the things in some of these age reversal packages that's available. We're looking at 3x4 genetics, which is an incredible genetic profile that tells you what kind of diet you should be on based on your genes. What kind of exercise should you be doing? What are you missing out on? My dietitian goes through that. She goes through food sensitivities, food allergies. She's going to look at the stool tests that we order on digestion, inflammation, your immunology in your gut. Do you have parasites? Do you have foods that you should be eliminating and going after treating your leaky gut, sewing up those tight junctions? Because a leaky gut leads to a leaky blood-brain barrier. And when that happens, you've got things that get into the blood, this kind of sacred space that gets in there and stirs up the inflammation in the microglial cells, the neuron support cells, that causes things we think like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and some of these chronic degenerative diseases neurologically. So other things you're going to see in this program, which I'm super excited about, we're going to be using CGMs, continuous glucose monitoring, as a tool for you guys to know. And those of you who have used the Libre machines, you already know, you put this thing on the back of your arm for 2 weeks and you read it with your phone, it's Bluetooth, and it tells you, oh, blueberries messed me up. They're supposed to be low glycemic index. Dr. Holthouse told me berries and things with a core are okay. Stay away from melons, grapes, mangoes, pineapple. Those are high glycemic. Treat them like dessert. Well, some people, based on their microbiomes, have different responses glycemically to different fruits and foods. I have people come in all the time and say, I didn't know lentils were such a problem for me. You know, and I'm a plant-based guy. I'm also a meat-based guy. I'm a equal opportunity diet person. I don't promote a one-size-fits-all diet, which we could talk about nutrition. That would take a whole nother hour. But the point being that there are certain foods you will learn about using a continuous glucose monitor, CGM, for a 2-week period. And some people wear them, we get a bunch of refills and they just wear them for, periodically through the year in the program to see, hey, is what you're telling me to do moving the needle? The cool thing about some of these tests, the biologic age, the vascular age on the ultrasound, some of the things that we're going to be doing with the actual cellular aging lab panels, we're going to do an entry level on these things and see where you're at. We're going to get a BIA to see your percent body fat, your percent lean. And we're going to do these things throughout the course of the year. It's an annual program. We want 12 months to change you. At the end of the 12 months, we're going to recheck several of those entry-level tests. The ultrasound, the lab test that looks at your age from a biological, biochemical perspective, and your actual biologic age on your genetics, your true diagnostic markers. And this is objective proof, because my CEO types, I love them, man. They come in, they're like my engineers. They got everything spreadsheeted, and they want to see objective evidence. I've spent the last 17 years of my integrative career saying, trust me, I'm a doctor. Try this. Everyone says it makes them feel better. Yeah, okay. Claims are wonderful. For the first time, we've got the ability to show you guys objective data that what you're investing in your health, above and beyond your Blue Cross of Idaho policy, there is some value here that you're not going to get anywhere else. And I can show it to you. That's the first. That's the first in my 35-year career. So that's what this program is about, PAR 1. It's to say there isn't any one thing that's the magic bullet for aging. Whether you take fisetin, apigenin, whether you take resveratrol, whether you take rapamycin, metformin, spermidine, the list gets longer every week. These are all, a lot of these things are flavonoids and polyphenolic natural compounds that come from things like French lilac. That's where metformin was derived from in the 60s. It's been a drug that they've made available since the 90s, right at the beginning of my career. It's got some amazing anti-aging properties. Yeah, there's some downside, but that's where the beauty comes, is being able to, from a medical doctor perspective, say, your kidney function, your age, your liver is not someone I would use metformin on. Over here, absolutely. Absolutely. Risk benefit falls on the benefit side for you, not for this person. So it's precision, it's personalized, it's taking all of this stuff that's out there on these podcasts. I watch these things and I'm like, I know nothing. I don't know how consumers are even figuring it out. Well, I know how they're doing it. They're wasting a lot of money. They're getting sucked into a lot of the marketing online, because every time there's an article, you scroll down far enough and there's a call to action to buy their supplement. No different than what I'm doing here. The difference is, I think, we're taking all that information and we're putting it into one place and we're vetting it against the best evidence and giving you protocols that make sense with what we know now. 2 weeks from now, I might not be telling you resveratrol is something you should be taking anymore. There may be something better. NAD by itself, you got all these drive-by clinics making a ton of money right now. We've kind of held back over there on this because we've realized that is just this much of the story, guys. Yeah, NAD is a big player. It affects 6 of the 9 hallmarks of aging. So I don't know if I want to recite them all here, but it's the big ones. It's the important ones. But is NAD the whole story? Heck no. I've got a bunch of people that have spent thousands of dollars getting IVs of NAD, feel great for a little while, and then, it's like, whatever, it's not sustainable. I'm not going to keep doing this. You have to look at this from a holism, a whole perspective, looking at diet, sleep, stress management, your exercise, your movement plan. What's your toxic burden? I didn't mention that. One of the other tests we're going to be looking at in the anti-aging program is we're going to be looking at toxins, urine environmental tox screens. Some people might need heavy metal tox screens. We're going to be looking at your hormones. We're going to be talking about peptides. There's been some recent changes with FDA and peptides, but I think we've got a workaround there for the things besides semaglutide and tirzepatide for weight loss. There's so much else in that whole discussion. So what we've done is we've taken kind of a holistic approach to age as a disease and as the number one risk factor for what's killing us all that's largely avoidable. And I think we've put it into a package for a 1-year period where we can demonstrate, dang, for you, that's what we need to focus on. And at the end of the year, my idea is to put you in some kind of a maintenance thing where it's sustainable, it's affordable, and you can get help when things go sideways. We can tweak it as new data comes out. You have a large group of people who say, "Oh my gosh, you guys, I'm so overwhelmed with pills, supplements. Seriously?" Most of it has to do with lifestyle, but it's also using basic extracts, all from plants, that really makes a lot of the difference happen. I think the biggest difference now is that we can look at you with objective labs and clocks, biologic age clocks, vascular, actual anatomic changes with vascular aging and plaque burden to see if what you're doing is working. Not everyone should just be on 15 different supplements that everyone listens to and hears might be good for you. It needs to be precise, and that's what this is about.